When I first started planning for my senior project, I only knew two things. I wanted it to be about turtles and reading. This is because both of these things have had a great impact in my life. For example, turtles to me represent my family, because every summer my whole family on my dad's side go to a cabin up north on a lake called Turtle Lake. This lake was aptly named. On this lake, my cousin Stephanie taught me how to catch frogs and turtles, and we'd hold races for whatever turtles we caught. I also wanted to write a book because reading is something I love to do, and I know it's something that can inspire kids. When I was little, I was given a book about the life cycle of frogs, and from this book, I was able to understand how to handle a frog without killing it, because this is something I struggled with. I want the kids who read my book to be able to understand something new about turtles to be able to help them. I first started planning the book March of last year. After my project was approved, I had to come up with a plot. For well over a month, I couldn't come up with anything, but finally, in the middle of service learning, I realized I could write my book about a turtle trying to cross the road. I was so excited, I texted my mom right then. She really liked the idea. In fact, she liked the idea too much, because by the time I got home, she had already written that book for herself, and I was back to square one. It took a couple months for me to come up with a new plot, but when I finally came up with it in July, I knew it was right. So that night, I sat down with a pen and lots of paper, and together my mom and I worked out the entire story. I wish I could say that I wrote the whole thing for myself, but I don't know how to write for a child's mindset, as I've only ever written for adults and teens. Luckily, my mom does story time at the library, so she was able to help me through all the kinks. After the book was written, we invited my grandma over to do some illustrating. I had decided to do a watercolor background with colored pencil characters that were cut out from a separate sheet of paper. This was so that the characters would pop better against the background. Doing the watercolor was fun because it was painting, but coloring in my characters was almost a chore because of how long it took me. After all the illustrating was done, all I had to do was photocopy the images to the computer and order the book. For my project, I grew in my environmental awareness and my understanding of a child's mindset. While I was writing the book, I did some research and found that in Minnesota, many lakes are uninhabitable due to extreme pollution from runoff and plastics. Also, as I was writing, I came to understand that children learn best through repetition. 3 things I learned were how to plot a book, how to write for children, and how to space out a project well. When I was thinking about my plot, I had to remember what I had already learned about children, and that I needed elements of repetition to keep them interested. I also had to constantly remind myself to keep the book short, as children's attention spans are not very long. I've struggled with procrastinating for a very long time, so spacing out my project over the summer months was a huge challenge, because there would be long bouts of times where I would forget about it. Another challenge was keeping myself motivated. This mostly applied when I was illustrating, as I ended up spending well over a week working on my illustrations, and that was all I would do on those days. I could have spent my time out with friends, and this fact made coloring, something I generally enjoyed doing, seem like a huge chore. Because of how boring illustrating had become, when I finally finished and ordered my book, I felt a huge sense of relief. When the book arrived, all I could do was flip through it, smiling, because I felt that I had finally achieved my childhood goal of becoming an author. And when I finally read my completed project to those 53 people, most of whom were children, I felt awe, because those children looked up at me and enjoyed something I had made. These were my successes. If I could thank anyone for helping me complete my project, it would be my mom, my grandma, and the lovely ladies at the Elk River Regional Library, who all helped me out so much in completing my goals. Writing my book has taught me a few things that will help me out a lot in the future. I know that I love writing and will continue to do so, and I may even finish writing the fantasy book I've been planning for years. Something I do every other Sunday is volunteer at my church in the children's ministry, and I hope to do so going forward. For my project, I've been able to understand how the children I help think, and this has led to great interactions between me and them. Lastly, this project has helped me to understand what it is I want to do with my life. For a long time, I thought I wanted to go into biology because I've always loved animals. I've learned that I actually enjoy helping out the environment a lot, and I plan to go into environmental science. The very last part of my senior project was writing a reflection paper. My thesis for the paper was, over the last 6 years at Spectrum High School, I've grown in many areas: my writing skills, my environmental awareness, and my ability to construct a well-done project. In my paper, I talked about how I've been able to see just how much my writing has changed since 6th grade, comparing a picture book I wrote then and the one I wrote for my project. I also touched on how I've come to realize how bad we've polluted our planet. I also talked about the actual process of writing and reading my book to children. Summed up, my paper was about books.